Hello, I'm John Spratt. My topic this month is the economy, jobs, fiscal responsibility, the topic on everyone's mind. And my guest is Tom Kahn, the Staff Director and Chief Counsel on the House Budget Committee. Tom, you've been at the center of the action with me. We've been dealing with the economy and the budget now, and these have been rough months for the country in particular.
Indeed they have, Congressman. The country's begun to make some progress, some promise. A year ago, right now, we were really on the verge of a worldwide economic meltdown, and things are improving. There are a number of areas where we've improved, but we've got a long way to go. Job growth, for example, a year ago, we were losing about 700,000 jobs a month, and as of last month, we lost around 30,000 jobs.
Let's get clear of the time frame. When January 20th of 2009 came and Obama took office, the economy that month alone was losing 770,000 jobs, and over the previous quarter, the average job loss was 660,000 jobs lost before he took the oath of office. This was a situation he found on his hands. The economy was not growing. To the contrary, it was contracting. It was shrinking at a rate of minus 5.4% a year. Those were the numbers you were delving into. That was the time frame we were talking about when this administration began its work. It inherited quite a bad situation.
Indeed, that's right. And the fact is that the economy was badly contracting at that time. Currently, the economy is now growing. Instead of a 6% contraction, it's growing by around 5.9%. And people's retirement funds, which badly dropped during the economic crisis, people call it the Great Recession, the worst recession we've had since the Great Depression. Now the people's retirement funds, their 401ks, are up about 60 to 70%. So that's significant improvement, but needless to say, we've got a long way to go.
From the beginning of the recession a couple of years ago until just a month or two ago, the loss in household net worth was $1.7 trillion, which is hard to believe. Not a trillion, it's $17 trillion. $17 trillion in household wealth was lost due to declines in 401ks, pension funds, equity in homes, and things of that nature. Huge precipitous decline. As you were saying, we were at the edge of an abyss looking over and about to cave.
That's right. And what happened is we passed a recovery bill, a stimulus bill. It was a major bill, about $787 billion. About a third of it was tax cuts, and 2/3 of it were what's called safety net programs, things like extended unemployment insurance for people who had lost their jobs and were unable to find other jobs, and also grants to states, local government, for example, for police forces and for schools, for education. And that recovery bill, according to the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which is nonpartisan and objective, that recovery bill, which you helped to write, has made a significant improvement. It's meant probably a gain, according to the Congressional Budget Office, of over 1 million jobs and an increase in the growth rate, adding about 1 to 3% growth. So the recovery bill has helped considerably.
Well, it took me a while to get accommodated to the idea of a $787 billion tax cut package along with spending increases, particularly in programs that help the people who hit it hardest, the unemployed, and also state government. Things are bad at the state government level in South Carolina, local government level, because they're getting hit hard on the diminished revenues. But if it hadn't been for the Recovery Act, making up for some of those lost revenues, things would have been far, far worse in every state, South Carolina in particular.
Indeed they would, and in particular, when you look at some of the things that the state government funds, like law enforcement, the state of South Carolina gives a considerable amount to local governments to help pay for police forces, health care and education, where schools were really in trouble because the funds they were getting from the state government was significantly cutting back. And the recovery bill has made a difference. It's clearly meant an improvement.
There's one particular provision of it that was carried over in the extended unemployment benefits that your staff, our staff on the Budget Committee, unearthed and presented to us. Namely, South Carolina was not taking full advantage of the programs the federal government was funding to help those who were in periods of extended unemployment, who really the people who need help the most. You recall those circumstances?
Yes, sir, I do. The federal government had passed a bill, and the President signed it into law, that would have allowed states to provide extended unemployment benefits. It would have been federal money to those people across the country and, of course, in South Carolina who had lost jobs and couldn't find new jobs.
All we had to do was change the law and add to the law a trigger based upon a certain definition of extended unemployment, and the money was ours, and everyone but 2 states had taken advantage of it.
Yes, sir. And to its credit, the General Assembly in Columbia, when you flagged this, when you drew attention to it, that there was federal funds that would be available for the state of South Carolina, the State Assembly met and it voted to change the law in order to make sure that that money was available.
Now, I think the Recovery Act has made a significant contribution to the recovery of our economy. Economists tell us now that we're out of recession. We're in a very tenuous, very, very skittish recovery. Everybody is concerned now about some fall back as opposed to falling forward. But in any event, I think most economists would acknowledge today that the Recovery Act played a significant part.
Yes, sir. And slide number 3 that we have here, if we can bring that up on the screen, that shows the dramatic change in the job loss that you were talking about before, Congressman. A loss of 779,000 jobs in January '09, and in January 2010, 36,000 jobs were lost. Certainly, we want to see job growth, not job loss, but that's quite a dramatic
difference. Going from
difference.
700,000 jobs lost, 700,000 plus, to 35,000 jobs lost is huge progress, and the 35,000 jobs lost was in a period when we had a blizzard during much of the country and probably overstates the employment impact of the economy.
Right, that's right. And needless to say, we've got a long way to go. And the state of South Carolina has a very stubbornly high unemployment rate, higher than the national average, which means we're going to have to be working harder than ever to make sure that the unemployment rate drops down to reasonable levels. So we've got a long way to go, but relative to where we were a year ago, we've made considerable improvements.
One other point about where we were. Every year the Congressional Budget Office, which is neutral and nonpartisan, brings to us just before the budget season begins a volume called the Outlook. Outlook on the economy, Outlook on the budget. They published such an outlook about 3 weeks before President Obama took office. And it showed that the deficit for the forthcoming year, in their estimation, would be $1.3 trillion. $1.3 trillion. That was the baseline from which the president began. Now, the Recovery Act has taken its toll, there's no doubt about it. $787 billion in tax cuts and spending increases would have an impact on any government's budget. It's had a big impact on the bottom line of today's budget, such that this year we're looking at a deficit probably of $1.5 trillion, $600 billion, which is a daunting number to say the least. We aren't home by any means when it comes to balancing the budget and getting rid of the deficit. But I think it needs to be borne in mind that the current administration, even before it applied the Stimulus Act, so-called Recovery Act, the deficit projected for that period of time was $1.3 trillion.
That's right. And chart number 6, if we can put that on the screen, chart number 6 shows those numbers. When the president took office, when he walked in the door, the Congressional Budget Office said that the deficit was going to be $1.2 trillion. It then went up to $1.4 trillion. Needless to say, that's untenable over the long term. And you, as chairman of the Budget Committee, have been working very hard to address the problem of the deficit. Of course, you can't cut the deficit until the economy recovers. You need to see a stronger economy, and once the economy recovers, so will the budget. But the budget that you've been working on, that you've been helping to put together, would begin to control this deficit and bring it down. The president's budget cuts the deficit in half over 4 years, from about $1.4 trillion to about $700 billion.
Let's stop right there.